I never thought the happiest day of my life would also become the scene of the most painful humiliation and the most profound revelation of my entire existence. That morning, the world looked like an impressionist painting of whites and ivories. Sunlight spilled through the bridal suite window, making dust motes dance like tiny diamonds in the air. The satin of my dress hung on a mannequin in the corner, a silent soldier waiting for its moment of glory. It smelled of peonies and hairspray, a strangely intoxicating combination that should have filled me with euphoria. Instead, my stomach churned. The makeup artist, a kind woman named Clara, was pinning the last strand of my hair in place. "Take a deep breath, honey," she said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "It's just bridal nerves. Everyone has them." I forced a smile. "Sure," I lied. "Bridal nerves." But that wasn't it. Every bride fears that something will go wrong, but my fear wasn't that the flowers would arrive late, or that the band would miss a beat, or that the wedding cake would fall. My fear had a name: Edward. My father, for months, his attitude toward me had grown colder and colder, like a winter slowly settling in. And though I tried to ignore it, to build a small fire with the love of my fiancé Michael, deep down I feared he would find a way to extinguish that flame just when I needed him most. I feared he would choose my wedding day to hurt me. To understand that fear, you have to understand silence. Silence was the soundtrack to my childhood. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy silence, filled with things unsaid. My father, Edward, was a man carved from oak and ambition. He moved through our house not like a father, but like a CEO checking on an underperforming branch. While other girls twirled in their father's arms during the holidays, I stood in the doorway, watching my father's back as he left for work before dawn and returned long after I'd gone to bed. His love, if you could call it that, was a transaction. Good grades, a tidy room, a calm demeanor, that bought an absence of criticism. But approval, warmth, pride, those were luxury items never in stock for me. My mother, Eleanor, was the perpetual peacemaker, a diplomat caught in a Cold War only I seemed to be aware of. She always said, "Your father loves you in his own way, honey. He just doesn't know how to show it." But I longed for something more tangible than his way. I longed for someone who would applaud loudly, not politely, when I showed off a drawing. Someone who would sit in the bleachers during the school play, not ask later, "Did you do well?" Someone who, just once, would look me in the eye and say, "I'm proud of you." That day never came. Instead, I grew up feeling like a guest in my own home, a tenant with a lease that could be revoked at any moment. My brother Daniel, on the other hand, owned the place. He was born 2 years after me, but from the start, he was anointed. He was the smart one, even though his grades never matched mine. He was the heir, despite his recklessness with money and responsibilities. He was the pride of the family, a title my father bestowed upon him with an ease that left me breathless. One memory, crystal clear, defines everything. I was 12, Daniel 10. We arrived home with our report cards. Mine was full of A's. Daniel's, a mix of B's and the odd C. We handed them to my father in his study. He looked at mine, nodded briefly, and said, "As expected?" No smile, no praise. It was simply me performing to my factory specifications. Then he looked at Daniel's. A long silence. I held my breath, waiting for the rebuke. Instead, my father smiled. A rare, genuine smile. "A B in PE, son. Well done. This boy has the makings of an athlete." And that was that. My academic achievements, erased. Daniel's mediocre performance, extracted and polished like a gem. That evening, my grandfather found me crying in the garden. He was my father's father, but it was as if they were made of different elements. My father was stone, my grandfather was warm earth. He wrapped his knobby arms around me and let me cry into his flannel shirt. "Don't let it get to you, my little star," he whispered. "Some men are so busy building empires that they forget to treasure their true treasures." He was my refuge, the only one who saw me. When he passed away 5 years later, it felt as if the only warm light in my world had been extinguished. Still, despite everything, a naive part of me dreamed that one day, perhaps on my wedding day, my father would finally look at me and see me as his treasure. He would see a daughter worthy of his love. When I met Michael, it was like learning to breathe after holding it my whole life. He was kind, soft-spoken, the kind of man who could open car doors and remember the name of my favorite dessert. He was an artist, a painter, and he saw the world in colors and textures I'd never noticed. He taught me that love wasn't a reward for performance, but an unconditional gift. Naturally, I was terrified to introduce him to my father. Dinner was so tense, I could have cut the steak with the atmosphere. My father subjected Michael to a cross-examination that would have made a murder suspect sweat. "Painting?" my father said, swirling the wine in his glass. "And how does that translate into a retirement plan exactly?" "Ambition? What's your 5-year plan, Michael? Do you expect my daughter to live off the occasional canvas sale?" Michael, to his eternal credit, remained cool. "My ambition, sir," he said with a calmness that amazed me, "is to build a happy life with your daughter. The rest our details will work out together." My father, predictably, dismissed him with a snort. "Happiness doesn't pay the bills," he said after Michael left. "He has no ambition. He'll never provide for you as you deserve." I wanted to scream, "How do I deserve it?" Or "How do you want to brag to your friends at the country club?" But, as always, I didn't. Instead, I continued dating Michael quietly, building a fortress of love strong enough to withstand the siege of my father's disapproval. When we got engaged, I didn't ask him, I informed him. The phone call was icy. "It's your life," he said, and hung up. Fast forward to the wedding day. Church bells rang in the distance, a joyful reminder of what was meant to be. Guests filled the pews, a sea of smiling, expectant faces. And I stood in the doorway, clutching my bouquet of white lilies with trembling hands. My mother adjusted my veil, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It will be okay," she whispered, though we both knew it was a lie. My father was supposed to walk me down the aisle. Tradition demanded it. My heart, despite everything, demanded it. I longed for that instant, that small symbol of acceptance that could just maybe heal years of hurt. He stood a few feet away, talking to one of his business partners, impeccable in his tuxedo. I leaned closer, my dress whispering on the stone. "Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "are you ready?" He turned slowly. The smile he had for his friend vanished, replaced by a mask of cold indifference. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my dress, on my face, but not really seeing me. And then he curled his lips into something between a sneer and a smirk. "You can walk by yourself," he said, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "After all, with the choice you've made, you're not really my daughter anymore." The words cut through me like a knife through ice. A collective gasp erupted from the nearest guests. I saw the horror on my aunt's face. I saw the shock on the face of my father's best friend. My mother tried to grab his arm, hissing, "Edward, don't!" He jerked her away. And there I was, a bride marooned in the doorway of her own wedding, with every pair of eyes in that church fixed on my trembling figure. The world narrowed into a tunnel. The ringing in my ears drowned out the whispers. I felt tears sting, hot and treacherous. "No," I said to myself. "Not here, not now." I swallowed back tears, a painful lump in my throat. I straightened my spine, channeling a strength I didn't know I possessed. I forced my feet to move. One step, then another. The echo of my heels against the marble floor was the only sound in the church, louder than the organ that had begun to play. People whispered. I saw faces filled with compassion. I saw others simply staring in morbid disbelief. And Michael, my dear, solid Michael, was standing before the altar, his eyes wide, his face a mixture of fury and anguish. He took a step, ready to run down the aisle to meet me, but I shook my head slightly. No, I had to do this alone. Because if my father thought I was so weak that I would fall apart without him, I would prove him wrong. This wouldn't be a walk of shame. It would be a walk of defiance. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As we reached the altar, Michael's face only a few feet away, the priest, Father Joseph, raised his hand. His expression was grave, almost trembling. He was a friend of my grandfather, a man who had watched me grow up. "Before we begin," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness of the cathedral, There is something I have been entrusted to deliver today." Nervous murmurs filled the church. I saw my father shift uncomfortably in his front row seat. From the folds of his robes, the priest produced a thick, sealed envelope. It was yellowed, antique-looking paper. On the front, in clear, elegant handwriting I instantly recognized, was my name. It was my grandfather's handwriting. "This letter," Father Joseph continued, his voice gaining strength, "was given to me by your dear grandfather, and mine, many years ago, with strict instructions that it be read aloud, here, at this altar, only on your wedding day." My knees nearly buckled. My grandfather? A whirlwind of love and pain coursed through me. He was the only man in my family who had ever shown me unconditional love. The priest carefully broke the seal. The sound of the paper tearing was like thunder in the silence. The air inside the church grew heavy, charged with an almost unbearable anticipation. He unfolded the pages and began to read. My grandfather's words echoed in the silence, an echo of a love that death had not been able to extinguish. "My darling granddaughter, my little star, if you're listening to this today, it means my time on earth is over, but yours is blossoming into a beautiful new chapter. I wish I could be there in person to see the amazing woman you've become, but I want you to know that my spirit walks beside you. Always." I felt tears burning my eyes and beginning to trace silent paths down my cheeks. The guests leaned forward, captivated. The priest continued, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm writing this to you because there are truths that sometimes take a generation to come to light. And I want you to know the truth of your worth, a truth your father, my son, has tried to hide from you or perhaps has never been able to see. For years, he's made you feel like you were less than, that your light didn't shine as brightly as your brother's. He's measured you by a yardstick of business and ambition, not realizing that your worth lies in your heart, in your soul. But know this, in my eyes, in the eyes of the man who built everything this family has, you are my chosen heir." Muffled gasps echoed throughout the church. My father's face, which had been tense and defiant, paled to the color of wax. My brother Daniel, sitting next to him, looked as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The priest's voice grew louder. "Your strength in the face of indifference, your unwavering kindness, your resilience in the face of criticism. That, my darling child, is this family's true legacy. It is the foundation upon which I built my life, and I entrust it to you, not to your father's cold ambition or your brother's careless arrogance, only to you. Everything I've built, every share, every property, every hard-earned penny is yours, because I know you will protect it, grow it, and use it with the wisdom and compassion they lack." The letter ended with words that shattered me and rebuilt me completely. "Never let anyone tell you that you walk alone, because even when those who should be by your side abandon you, you carry me inside you. You are the best part of me. Go and build the life you deserve. With all the love a heart can hold, your grandpa." For an instant, there was only silence. A silence so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. My bouquet trembled in my hands, the white lilies bearing witness to my entire world shifting. Then the whispers began, like a wind rising before a storm. The guests turned their heads toward my father, their gazes no longer of curiosity, but of cold, biting judgment. My mother sobbed openly into her hands, a sound of pain and shame. Michael reached out and took my hand, his fingers firm and warm, anchoring me to the new reality. My father, Edward, once so proud, so cold, so unwavering, froze on his pew. He was exposed, his cruelty and shallowness laid bare before all those he had spent his life trying to impress. The emperor had no clothes. I should have felt vindicated. I should have reveled in the poetic justice of it all. But instead, I felt free. A lightness came over me, as if a weight I'd carried since birth had been lifted from my shoulders. Free from years of begging for crumbs of his approval. Free from the chains of being less than. Free from the silence that had always defined me. I looked at the priest, whose eyes were filled with tears and deep affection. Then I looked at the guests, who now regarded me with a newfound respect. And finally, my eyes fell on my father. And for the first time in my life, I felt neither fear, nor longing, nor anger. I felt only a distant pity. I said the words I had never dared to speak, not in anger, but with utter calm. "You can no longer define me." With that, I turned to Michael. He was crying too, not out of pity, but out of overwhelming pride. Father Joseph, his voice steady again, said gently, "Shall we continue?" And I nodded. I walked the last meter to my future, not as a daughter seeking her father's hand, but as a woman who had finally reclaimed her own worth, her own heritage, her own history. The vows we exchanged felt different after that. They weren't just words, they were building blocks. They were the foundation of a new life, a new legacy. When Michael and I said "I do," it wasn't just a promise to each other. It was a declaration to the world. We were building a new family, one based on unconditional love, truth, and mutual respect, not control, expectations, or lies. The "you may kiss the bride" was followed by thunderous applause that seemed to shake the church to its foundation. As I walked back down the aisle, hand in hand with my husband, I passed my father. He didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, a man of stone, trapped in the ruins of his own pride. In the following weeks, the letter became the talk of the town. My father, as expected, tried to challenge the will in court. He hired the most expensive lawyers, arguing undue influence and my grandfather's diminished mental capacity. But my grandfather had been a meticulous man. The document was airtight, signed before witnesses, notarized, and accompanied by a psychiatric evaluation confirming his perfect lucidity. My father lost, humiliatingly. Daniel called me once, not to apologize, but to demand a share. "It's our birthright," he yelled into the phone. "No," I replied calmly. "It's my responsibility, and you haven't proven yourself to be very responsible." And I hung up. My mother, torn between a lifetime of loyalty to her husband and overwhelming shame, finally called me back through tears. We talked for hours. She cried, she apologized. I told her I forgave her, but things would never be the same again. I needed to build my own peace, away from his chaos. I no longer needed his approval. Now I had something far better, self-acceptance. And the irony, money, property, investments, they didn't matter as much. Of course, they gave me security. They allowed Michael and I to live without financial worry, supporting his art and my own philanthropic ventures. But the real treasure wasn't in the bank account. It was in the words of that letter. Because my grandfather gave me something far more valuable than wealth. He gave me the truth. He gave me the validation my soul had longed for. And in that truth, finally, I found peace. If my story has touched you, if you've ever felt invisible, or believe no one should allow others to define their worth, then join this community here at the Best Life Stories. This isn't just my story, it's the story of everyone who's had to fight to be seen. Share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone in their struggle. Sometimes, a story is the lifeline someone needs. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you true stories of resilience, betrayal, and the incredible power of finding your own voice. Because here at the Best Life Stories, we believe every story matters, and yours does too.